July 1st. Welcome to Japan and World Update, coming to you from our NHK studios in Tokyo. I'm Mick Corliss.
And I'm Risa Shimizu.
In our top stories, Japan's cabinet is set to change the interpretation of the Constitution to enable the country to exercise its right to collective self-defense.
Senior officials from Japan and North Korea have begun talks in Beijing.
And the Bank of Japan's quarterly Tankan survey shows that major manufacturers were less confident about the economy in June compared with the previous period. Now, the news in detail. Japan is on the brink of a major turnaround in its post-war security policy. The cabinet is set to change the interpretation of the Constitution to enable the country to exercise its right to collective self-defense. The governing Liberal Democratic Party and its junior coalition partner, New Komeito, agreed on a final draft of the cabinet decision when they met on Tuesday morning. Past governments have long maintained that Japan has the right to collective self-defense, but they have traditionally interpreted the war-renouncing constitution to mean the country cannot exercise that right. The draft says the government has concluded that the constitution should be interpreted to permit the use of force to the minimum extent necessary as a measure for self-defense under certain conditions. These conditions include when a foreign country that has a close relationship with Japan comes under armed attack, and when there is a clear danger of Japan's survival being threatened or people's rights being fundamentally overturned. After the meeting, LDP Vice President Masahiko Komura told reporters that the ruling coalition produced results in response to a request from Prime Minister Shinzo Abe that it study the matter. Komura said legislation is needed for Japan to exercise the right to collective self-defense. He said otherwise the self-defense forces cannot move an inch. New Komeito Deputy Chief Kazuo Kitagawa said, "Reinterpretation of the Constitution has reached its limit." He said any further changes would require a constitutional amendment. The cabinet is expected to formally approve the policy at an extraordinary meeting later in the day. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is then scheduled to hold a news conference to explain the reasons behind the decision.
Citizens demonstrated outside the Prime Minister's office in central Tokyo on Tuesday morning. The rally organizer says some 2,000 people attended. The demonstrators held placards saying that they are against cabinet approval of reinterpreting the Constitution. A 54-year-old woman from Fukui Prefecture says she feels it is wrong to allow such an important act of exercising the right to collective self-defense only through cabinet approval. She added that it would allow future administrations to reinterpret the Constitution in any manner that suits them. A 45-year-old teacher from Okayama Prefecture said he doesn't want children to take part in potential future wars. On Monday night, an even larger number of demonstrators held a rally surrounding the Prime Minister's office. Organizers said more than 10,000 people took part.
Senior officials from Japan and North Korea have begun talks in Beijing. North Korea is due to clarify the members of a panel that will investigate the fate of Japanese citizens abducted decades ago. The meeting began on Tuesday morning at the North Korean embassy. In previous talks in Sweden in late May, North Korea promised to set up a committee to fully investigate the fate of the abductees and other missing citizens. The Japanese delegation is led by the chief of the Foreign Ministry's Asian and Oceanian Affairs Bureau, Junichi Ihara. North Korea is represented by its envoy for normalizing ties with Japan, Song Il-ho. At the outset, Ihara said the talks mark an important step toward resolving various matters of concern. Ihara said the agreement reached in the previous round of talks must be steadily implemented and its effectiveness ensured. He said Japan hopes to hold constructive debate after North Korea explains the makeup of the Special Investigative Committee. Japanese delegates want to find out if the committee will have broad authority to investigate all state organs in North Korea, and whether the head of the secret police will be among its members. Ihara also lodged a strong protest against Pyongyang's launch of ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan on Sunday. He said the move breaches UN Security Council resolutions and the spirit of the Pyongyang Declaration the two countries signed in 2002. Ihara strongly urged the North not to stage any more launches. Song justified the missile launch, saying Pyongyang does not recognize the UN resolutions. On the agreement reached in the May talks in Sweden, Song said both sides should responsibly play the roles required of them in order to implement the accord in good faith.
The Bank of Japan's quarterly Tankan survey shows that major manufacturers were less confident about the economy in June compared with the previous period. It's the first decline in 6 quarters. The central bank released on Tuesday the results of the survey conducted last month. Sentiment at major manufacturers stood at plus 12 points. That's down from plus 17 points in March. Possible reasons for the decline are sluggish domestic sales of goods like automobiles and electrical appliances in the April-June period, compared to a last-minute rise in demand before the consumption tax hike in April. Exports were also sluggish during the quarter. But large manufacturers forecast a 3-point improvement in the quarter that has just started. That reflects their view that the economic slowdown due to the tax hike may be temporary.
You're listening to NHK World Radio Japan from Tokyo. Ukraine's President Petro Poroshenko has declared that he will not extend a unilateral ceasefire with pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine, raising fears of further bloodshed. Poroshenko read out a statement early Tuesday after consulting the government's National Security and Defense Council. The 10-day ceasefire expired on Monday night. The president unilaterally announced the truce on June 20th as part of a peace plan that called on pro-Russian militants to disarm. Poroshenko blamed what he called criminal actions of armed groups for scuttling a unique chance to put his peace plan into practice. The president said offensive actions in addition to defensive ones are needed to protect Ukraine's territorial integrity, security, and people's lives. He said ending the ceasefire is the government's answer to terrorists and that he has ordered security forces to launch an offensive. Poroshenko added that his peace plan has a strategic meaning for Ukraine as a whole and remains valid. He suggested he will continue seeking disarmament and work for greater regional autonomy. However, fears are rising that the end of the government's ceasefire may intensify the conflict in eastern Ukraine.
The sharp divide between sectarian groups is hampering the formation of a national unity government in Iraq. Lawmakers have not been able to choose a new prime minister to take over for incumbent Nouri al-Maliki before the new parliament meets. The first parliamentary session is scheduled to start on Tuesday, following the general election in April. Lawmakers have the task of electing the prime minister, parliamentary speaker, and president. Many Iraqis are calling on Maliki to step down, claiming his preferential treatment of fellow Shias has spurred greater support for Sunni militants. The process of forming a national unity government will likely become even more difficult as the crisis worsens. On Monday, Sunni militants declared a new Islamic State in territory they seized in Syria and Iraq. They also said they have changed their name to the Islamic State, dropping references to Iraq and the Levant. The rebels have already taken control of the northern Iraqi cities of Mosul and Tikrit. Iraqi military forces launched an aerial and ground offensives in Tikrit on Monday, but fierce counterattacks led to a deadlock.
Sunni militants in Iraq are increasing their presence after declaring an Islamic State. Analysts say the unilateral action could provoke a backlash from local Sunni Iraqis who have been supporting them. Sunnis have voiced their support of the militants in protest of Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's administration that favors the Shia majority. Militants released an online audio statement on Sunday declaring the establishment of a new Islamic State in seized territory. The statement names leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi as the ruler of the Muslim community known as Caliph and urges Muslims everywhere to be loyal to him. The group is also tightening control over occupied territory. After seizing territory in northern Iraq, they are continuing fierce battles with military troops across the country. Experts say the rebels timed the declaration to coincide with the first day of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan in a bid to encourage Muslims to join their movement.
A U.S. Navy-sponsored joint maritime exercise in the Pacific has kicked off, with the Chinese Navy taking part for the first time. The multinational Rim of the Pacific exercise, or RIMPAC, is held every 2 years off Hawaii. The Chinese Navy is dispatching 4 vessels, including a missile destroyer.